let's try this one more time. Alright, let's try this again and let's hope the signal holds. I got rid of some of the background applications, closed a bunch of pages and all this other good stuff, and hopefully that does a better job with the signal. Not to mention potentially having to get another computer if I can't solve the Wi-Fi stuff. This is aggravating. But that's it. Let's try to go forward either way. And yes, I'm looking at the bar. There's a little bar at the bottom of my screen that goes green or red, or depending on how good the signal strength is. Alright, Tim Canova. So there are a few minor or small stories that I want to hit on, and then I'm getting to larger stories. And if it doesn't work, like I said, I'll upload my better copy of this one that gets rid of the lagging and everything else. So Tim Canova files a lawsuit saying that there was election rigging, that there was no way he could get 5% in the polls, and that this is indicative of election rigging. This is around the exact same time that Brenda Snipes has seemingly found a bunch of votes in that race. I mean, it looks a little dicey. Brenda Snipes is the person who was essentially violated the law when they tossed out Tim Canova's election campaign, or his ballots back in the 2016 election when he was running against Wasserman Shultz. The 2018 run was essentially a rerun of the first election, with a bunch of more calamitous items associated with it. I gotta be honest, the finding a bunch of votes was a little bizarre, and it did look a little weird. So I'm not necessarily saying Tim Canova was wrong in pointing out that, hey, this election results looks extremely strange, especially being in Broward County with all of the shenanigans that took place before in Broward County. So that said, Tim Canova, Wasserman Shultz to court. There's been an update on this, and Tim Canova wrote the update himself. Let's see if I can flip to this. Yeah, and I'm sorry for the signal strength on this. This is horrendous. And that's great. Alright, let's flip. Important update on our election challenge. So let's just give a basis for all of this. Some weeks ago, I filed the lawsuit in the Florida Circuit Court contesting the November 6, 2018 election against Wasserman Shultz. Our lawyers then provided notice to the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives of our challenge and submitted a complaint requesting that the House not seat Wasserman Shultz. Essentially, look, there's a challenge to this particular election. I don't want you to seat her because there may be, if shenanigans are shown in this election, we want a recount. Not just a recount, we want a revote. So he makes his base, make no mistakes, there's for questioning our election results for nearly 100,000 votes purportedly cast for Wasserman Shultz, where there were no indication of when, where, and how the ballots were cast. According to computer programming experts, this is an indication that those votes could have been shifted from me or another candidate to Shultz by hackers or insiders simply altering the software source code through wireless cellular modems on the electronic scanning and tabular machines used in Broward County. The software is closed source, meaning it's considered proprietary, the private property of the software vendors, and not subject to inspection by our experts or anyone, meaning it's private property. Even though it's used for the election, you can't inspect it to see whether there's any kind of nefarious coding in the process. It is a black box to you, even though you're using it to make your votes. Now, whether he has anything on the basis of this or not is somewhat secondary to that point. If we're using, look, personally, I think votes should be hand counted. It gets rid of all of this nonsense of, is it hacked, is it not hacked, is software, and all. That goes away. I'm just saying, that goes away. And even if you want to use computers in order to tabulate the count, I would imagine that has to be, to some degree, inspectable by the public itself. You can't have proprietary software for something this important, especially when people have questions on whether or not it's legit count. You will continually get these questions. So he goes into statistical stuff. Now, basically, the update, though, is right here. Unfortunately, when the new Congress convened last week, the House voted to seat Deborah Wasserman Shultz without any inquiry into our election results. This was deja vu all over again after a Florida court ruled in May that Brenda Snipes had illegally destroyed the ballot cast for 2016 Democratic primary against Deborah Wasserman Shultz. I wrote to every House and Senate member. The silence was deafening. Not one member of Congress bothered to respond to our plea for congressional investigation. I am one of those people that believes that recounts are a good thing, not a bad thing. I mean, ultimately, the goal from the standpoint of the population is to make sure that the right person got elected. All of us go into an election, we make our vote. And regardless of who wins, there should be some legitimacy of the system to ensure that the person who you voted for is the person that wins that election. From the standpoint of the population, that should be the point. Recounts legitimize the process itself by allowing you to inspect that the person who we voted for is actually the person who we voted for. I mean, I agree with Canova that that's not a bad thing, and that's somewhat of a big deal that she was able to toss or destroy the ballots without anybody ever saying anything about the fact that she destroyed the ballots, even though the destruction of the ballots was illegal by federal and state law. Right here. The U.S. Constitution makes clear that the House is the final judge of qualifications and the elections of its members. Now that the House has seated Deborah Wasserman Shultz, our election is effectively moot as a procedural matter, and we expect the Florida Circuit Court to dismiss the case any day now on narrow procedural grounds. And since the lawsuit is mooted by the House action, we will not be appealing the court's expected dismissal. This is, you know, for the most part, this is a lot of not bluster is the wrong word for it, but this is a lot of him making his case on why he made the case, with this small section being really the update that he has an expectation that they're going to dismiss the case any day now, and that he is not going to appeal it, because at the end of the day, the House is the arbiter on who's born into the House. Right here. The good news is that even though Wasserman Shultz has been seated, there is nothing stopping the House Committee of Administration for conducting hearings on our fake election, invalidating the election, and ordering a revote. There's much more at stake than the congressional district. The system of black box voting undermines public faith. That's true. That's very true. Whether you're a Democrat or whether you're a Republican or whether you're somewhere in between, you should want to know that the person who's elected is indeed the person who was elected. And if you can't necessarily challenge the system that puts that person in office, how do you know that the system was legit? You're stuck with an act of faith. Well, this should be somewhat of a scientific process, not a religious one. The system of black box voting undermines public faith and confidence in our election results. If the electronic voting machines were rigged in Broward County, they could be rigged almost anywhere. If we fail to clean up the corruption now, electronic voting machines may well be rigged in some of the 2020 presidential primaries and general election, and perhaps not by the Russians or the Chinese. That's why I've been calling for a ban on these inherently vulnerable electronic voting machines, replacing them with a system of 100% hand-counted paper ballots in public. Nothing less will help restore the conditions necessary for a functioning democracy. And on this point, I agree with him. So, I mean, that's, for the most part, the update. Let's see. I'm going to have to re-upload this video, guys, because I know the stream is not doing all that well. And give me 1 second, belt. I'm pulling up Streamlabs now. Let's see who's here. The corruption is gaining grounds. Kalita Spider. The Snipes was asking for $70,000 for him to have them reviewed and destroy them against state and federal retention laws. Yeah, the asking for money to get it reviewed is also weird to me. I mean, all of those things are bars on the door, meaning each one makes it more and more difficult for the person to be able to evaluate whether or not the vote is what the vote is. They did the same thing in the Maine election when I think it was Jill Stein was asking for a recount. And they were like, well, it's going to cost you X amount to get a recount. It's like, what do you mean it's going to cost me X amount to get a recount? How do you know that the vote is what the vote is? And why are you charging money to verify the vote? This should be something that, we take on ourselves as part of public trust. Let's see. Come on. You're looking fuzzy to me. Yeah, it's because this buffering. Dan Harris, you think that's an accident? I think not. I don't think it's an accident that they charge them more money in that way. They do that in order to make it difficult for them to find out and create a disincentive. Debbie does ballots. Do you think Canova could have gone with supporting Israel is far more anti-Semitic than opposing it because it conflates the country of the Jews and therefore Judaism with bigotry, Islamophobia, murder, and apartheid? Miami, Broward are only 3% Jewish. Robert Browning Jr. Thank you for your work. Sometimes you're too nice and open to plain idiots. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Look, people have their positions. Sometimes they're being legit. Sometimes they're not. If they're being earnest, I give a little bit more credit or leeway to somebody who is not. Do you think Canova, I have to read this one again. Do you think Canova have gone with supporting Israel is far more anti-Semitic than opposing it because it conflates the country of the Jews and therefore Judaism with bigotry, Islamophobia, murder, and apartheid? Miami and Broward are only 3% Jewish. I mean, I get your point. That's kind of funny. Conflating Israel as a Jewish state as opposed to just a state. Meaning the behavior that Israel takes when in this kind of raw support of Israel as a Jewish state gets in this kind of weird conflation. Like if somebody said America was a white state, people would be like, oh, they feel some kind of way about that. They'd be like, oh God, that's so racist. But Israel calling itself a Jewish state doesn't, for whatever reason, get that same. But your point is, but I get your point, Baltazar. Making that conflation, all of the actions that Israel takes gets almost conflated as the Jews are taking them as opposed to the state of Israel is taking them, using Judaism as a political card. I think I get your point, Baltazar. But I don't know if it's far more racist. I don't think it's far more racist. All right. I'm going to end this because this video is buffering extraordinarily bad, and I'm going to upload the original video itself, which wouldn't have the buffering associated with it. If I can't get this worked out, I'll just upload the videos that I plan to do today. We're going to call the cable company today and see what's going on, and worst come to worst, I may have to get another computer. So stay tuned. Hopefully I can fix this before the next stream. Thanks all. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in a few. Have a good one.